So the usage of music reflects that. So their establishments are in post-war Kosovo. They have a rock and roll school. Palestine community music, which involves training youth and young professionals to bring music to marginalized children in West Bank refugee camps. Rwanda youth music, introducing music therapy, training, and community music activities to empower youth and children affected by HIV and AIDS. There's community music and health in Uganda, training youth leaders to use music to address the effects of HIV in young people. Music Bridge, which is in Northern Ireland, bridging the divides in Northern Ireland with community music training and activities. Welcome Notes is their program in the Netherlands, which works with groups of war refugees that have come into the country to try to bring comfort, solidarity, and hope. And Soy Musica in El Salvador. And they work with Salvadorian music teachers and community leaders to share tools to provide to at-risk children, providing them with safety, inclusion, creativity, and joy, basically, which we a lot of times take for granted. But as you can see, they work with so many different populations and various cultures. And that's really inspiring to me. It made me ask the question, why? Why music? What and how does that work? And how is music a tool to be used in these places? What about it makes it so important? And what can we learn from it here? Why is it important to have children's music at a church? Why is it important to teach music in our schools? What is that instinct within us, and even the science of it generally? So the first day, we walk into the training, and it's in the Netherlands, and they had said to pack warm clothes. And the weather was sweltering hot. So I'm looking at the weather, and it says like you're going to melt. But the people who had told me to come said to pack warm clothes. So we're all confused. It was so hot that during the first night, every single person in the program took multiple cold showers. And there's no air conditioning because Europe, especially this part, does not normally experience heat like that. So the first morning, we're all packed into one big room, and we're like sweating onto each other and trying to hold our patients and communicating with each other over several language barriers. And it's like, what always amazes me about humanity is how quickly we break down under physical discomfort. Like when you have to go to the bathroom, or you're hungry, or you're hot, and how you just get so angsty so fast. So we're all there kind of talking, and then one of the main trainers comes in, and he looks around, and everyone gets very quiet. And this man's name was Otto, and he's Dutch, and smiled, and he picked up his hands, and he clapped once, and then he went. And everyone clapped once. And for 1 hour, we played musical games with body percussion and singing, listening to music while tossing around hacky sacks to the beat, sometimes only listening to each other's breathing. For 1 hour, we did this, a variety of musical activities, without speaking a single word in any language. And at first, it was awkward. And then suddenly there were 50 adults from all over the world in a room playing together. And that's really, after a while, you look around and everyone's laughing and running and singing and banging and in an organized way, just by watching each other and observing. And it was the best feeling that without speaking, we were able to interact and create something. By taking away words, I felt we started to listen to each other on a much deeper level. So finally, when Otto must have thought his spell was complete, he says, "What just happened?" And that was really the essence of the rest of the training. So over the course of the 4 days with these people, I was taught dozens of musical activities, which involved group drumming. We used a lot of djembes, A lot of body percussion, a lot of circle games where we would stand in the circle and pass around clapping, rhythm, singing, notes, or movement. We learned simple folk songs from all over the world, which I thought was very cool. There was a lot of call and response, and they pulled from all different cultural backgrounds. We would always do an activity, and the question afterwards was, what just happened? And the answer was always the same: safety, equality, inclusion, creativity, and quality. This is their methodology, the methodology of Musicians Without Borders. And every musical activity they teach must meet these points. And I find it very fascinating that you can see in them Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the first is safety. No one is ever singled out in a way that applies pressure in these activities. If they know pressure will be applied to them, they feel safe. Will not be applied to them. They feel safe and can participate in the activity. We've all had the experience of stage fright, which can sometimes be totally crippling to creativity if you aren't confident, and especially if you've gone through a traumatic experience. So no one is asked to do anything outside their comfort zone, which is interesting. Inclusion is the next one. Everyone always has a role in each musical activity, even if it's passive. So even if it's incredibly passive, it's a role that is necessary to the success and creation of the whole. Inclusion, community, is an incredibly human need. It's a social need that allows us to feel purpose, I think, and belonging. The next is equality. So no matter the role, every participant is absolutely considered equal. Everyone has a piece of the activity to carry themselves. The next is creativity, and this is the first self-actualizing of the criteria. And this is so important. It's kind of the godlike instinct, right, which is present in all of us, the need to create. Also, the need to be seen, and seen in what you can bring to the world with just yourself, your unique self, and acknowledged that your unique self and whatever you put out is needed and good. So that's nourished here in those activities. Everyone is given the opportunity to express themselves in their own unique way and bring something new into existence. And this provides so much purpose, a sense of fulfillment, and a reminder that each of our unique lives and expressions are needed in the world. And the last is quality. And Musicians Without Borders takes great care that at the end of the day, every participant feels they have created something that they are proud of. And I think that that's very important, not to lose sight of how important all of these things are for human beings, no matter how simple they seem or how much we can take them for granted. But when you are dispossessed of material objects or of your humanity, creating something of which you feel proud is invaluable. So that is the methodology, those, I think, 5 things, and how it works. And it's present in every musical activity. So I've spent time kind of learning these things afterwards also, and started teaching some to the kids. So one of the main things I took away was, in each game we played, in each musical piece we created, I always felt seen by the group. I always felt that my voice was important, even if I was just standing still. I also found that I was listening with my whole being, if that's possible, and I think it is possible. And this is really important to me here and then as I went forward, this idea of listening. Sometimes we would be drumming together and the beat would be sent around so fast that all of my senses would have to be so sharp in order to stay in the pattern. Additionally, we also did songwriting collaborations. So there was listening in a deeper way. We would be given a topic And I remember one example of this was, we'd be given a topic and they would say, okay, take 30 seconds to write down all the words you can think of that relate to that topic. Go. So we would be like, okay, if our topic is journey, like da-da-da-da-da, search, da-da-da, like everything we could possibly think of. And after that, so they're all on a piece of paper, and the woman said, the facilitator goes, okay, now you are not allowed to use any of the words that you just wrote down. We were like, what? And some people were like, well done, you really got us. And it was like, well, how am I supposed to express this now? So then there becomes this idea, then you're just trying to say anything and like find some seed of inspiration. And you're really trying to talk about something without talking about it, right? And what I found was, when you're trying to pull this music out of the air, everyone is throwing out words and ideas, trying to get something to stick, but you stop listening so much to the words that they're saying, and you start to listen on a very deep level to the deeper intention which is trying to come through the words. People can talk a lot and say, okay, well, like, journey, home, I'm lost, da, 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 da. And you're not necessarily gonna write journey, home, I'm lost in a line of the song. But I think Bob Dylan is really good at this. But if you say, like, you know, rolling, I don't know, now I'm trying to improvise, rolling down, you know, the track that goes both ways or something, you can come up with these sentences, with topics, with music that do get at the idea, but it's a deeper kind of listening. The words are never the thing to translate. You listen to what is coming through. So this type of listening, I think, is incredibly important for our spiritual and societal health. In all the different activities, I observed that I felt like I was paying attention to others, paying so much attention to what was happening, to how they were feeling, to who was moving what way. So I recently looked up the definition of to listen, and one definition is to give attention to. And then I thought, well, what's attention? So I looked up attention, and in looking that up, I found that it comes from the Latin attendere, which literally means to stretch towards, to lean towards. And I thought that was a beautiful description of listening, to stretch towards, to lean towards. So I'll come back to that a little bit later. There's one other part of the training to give you the full view of it, which I thought was incredibly important, and that is trauma. We took a class on music and trauma. How is trauma related to and impacted by music? Many of the populations, like I've said, that Musicians Without Borders works with have undergone a traumatic experience. So it was a very important part of our training. And one of the trainers, the man who gave the class, Darren, had a really great way, I thought, of explaining trauma. He said, we have 3 basic responses to danger and bad experiences: fight, flight, or freeze/play dead. And I often have this, I think Pastor Katie, you can ask her about, we had this discussion once, and she said, I'm definitely freeze or play dead. So if there ever comes a life or death situation, I will be the one like frozen on the ground. So normally in a system that is functioning healthily, our danger responses come up when there's danger, and then we can self-regulate back to normal existence when the danger goes away. But there are some experiences people can have where the danger that's there is never resolved. It never goes away. So it stays with them. And their danger response stays active all the time. So they are perceiving danger all the time and have the inability to feel safe. And this can look different depending on the individual. They can either be in fight mode, which often manifests as anger, flight, or freeze. And the freeze Darren said, called it the attic and the basement. You can either be up here all the time, or you can be way down here, which we often see people who are very, very reserved and unresponsive, a kind of depressed state of being. So music can actually offer help to people who have experienced trauma in different ways. And they had this great acronym, MATES, M-A-T-E-S. So M is the mind, positive psychology, good thoughts, thoughts with purpose. So engaging your mind in a purpose. So with these games, kind of playing those, learning them, you always have to be thinking and paying attention. Air is the second one, which is literally your breathing. And I'm sure everyone has heard someone say to them, take a breath in, and then take a long breath out. And that actually, if you inhale and then to have a longer exhale, it tricks your body into thinking it's safe, into calming down. So I find it cool that that's exactly what singing is, right? You take a breath in and then you sing a phrase. The third was T, which stands for tree, which means grounding. So a lot of times, people who have had very dangerous experiences, especially like related to conflict, bodies may not feel safe to be in. And so the idea of grounding is to bring people back to their physical forms and their right to be here, their right to exist, and connection with the earth and the rest of nature. E is expression, and that's fairly obvious when it comes to a musical game or creative game, that you have the right to speak, to sing, to say what you're feeling, because our expression is really a release of our thoughts and emotion. And then the third is stretching, which just means movement, and it's also a body-affirming thing. I think it was cool that Katie talked about embodied God this morning. It was kind of like, oh, that relates. So music and dance, I think, have really only been separated in something crazy like the past, I want to say like 200 years. That doesn't quite make sense, but for most of human history, music and dance travel together. So there's a lot of dancing that goes along with the games. So that was the training, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of a synthesis of what I learned and how I think those lessons apply to faith, love, international relations. So before I went, I knew of Musicians Without Borders as an organization which brought peace through music. And I always get a little bit uncomfortable when people use phrases like world peace or say things like music is a universal language. I think these concepts have value, but I get nervous that they are oversimplified, digestible one-liners that don't do enough to say, well, why? Why is it? And what is the actual behavior? What is the action that we do on a daily basis that makes it so? So what does peace mean? Music is not, in my opinion, it's not a universal language. A minor chord in our tonal landscape means something very different in a different tonal landscape. The notion that a major third is cheerful to us may not be the case all over the world. And there's this great quote by the neuroscientist Daniel Levitin that says, music is as universal as language, but it is not itself a universal language. So what then? What is the connection between music and peace? And I think the answer is the very meticulous scientific methodology and research that I just outlined, that I learned in the training. The answer is the very basic human needs that we all have, and the ability of music to provide a space for us to address them. The answer is the ability for music to teach us how to listen to more than words, very deeply and without responding, to lean towards each other. The answer is that music helps us practice bringing our own vulnerability and authenticity into this life. It helps us see the importance of bringing our souls into the world through our own creativity. It can teach us our life is a needed manifestation of God. Music teaches us to connect to each other as it engages us in building something together. It can help us to not feel lonely and remember how equal we are all made. Music can raise the voices of the unheard. In helping to alleviate trauma, it helps us heal wounds so we don't pass them on. All of these things are peace. And another important thing about music is that it happens moment to moment. It is a living, breathing thing every time it gets created. It's always a conversation. It is present. It requires us to be present to what is happening in the room around us, not stuck in the past or anxious about the future. And again, when I hear what Jesus talks about in the Gospels, it strikes me that he is always harping on presence. Yes, the laws are necessary and good. Keeping the Sabbath is important, and it was written into law for an amazing reason. But what about the man who needed to be healed on the Sabbath? Yes, we all find powerful and meaningful community in our national or racial identity, and this is good. But what about the woman from another land whose child is dying? What makes our identity better than that of another? Music is always present. It is always a conversation. It also reminds us that although we are all separate entities, and it is incredibly important for us to be separate entities, we are also intimately connected to each other and to things that we cannot see. Even though we can only hear music moment by moment, we know that there is a whole piece which the notes are part of. So when we are listening, we are totally in the experience of the moment, of whatever sound is being created. But we also know that it's part of a much grander scheme. It's part of a key that the rest of the piece is written in. We know there is a whole which this note is only part of. We know that the piece is trying to get back to do, to resolve at the end, and we will finally be home after having taken this long journey through harmony. Only when the piece is over do we get to think back on the whole thing, but while it's happening, we listen to one note and then it fades away, and then the next one breaks into our ears, and it is constantly changing. We are constantly adapting, and we are right there waiting every moment for the next note. We don't usually think too far into the future or sit thinking about the notes we just heard while the music is playing. We show up for each note as it happens, and this is the greatest lesson of all, I think. In life, we have to show up to the people around us. We know we are part of a grand symphony, and the only way to play it through to the end is one note at a time. So world peace, I think, is living presently. It is living musically and leaning towards others, listening on a deep level in the way we listen to music. And when this happens, we have no choice but to acknowledge our connection to others. What happened in that room when nobody spoke for an hour, but we were able to communicate and create something? So we notice our connection. And then what does connection show us? What do we learn when we watch rain become flowers? What do we learn when people from all over the world create music together in a room without speaking? We learn that although we can perceive each other as separate entities, although we can say you and me and her and the grass and the rain, and these are good for the functionality of life, there is an undeniable thread that surrounds us all and runs through us all. There is some unifying consciousness of which we are all part, and I think we call that God. So with its capacity to teach listening, presence, provide safety, inclusion, an outlet for creativity, equality, and quality, and to heal trauma, music can teach peace. It can be for us a reminder of our condition of connection to each other through God, and the fact that we are all a symphony trying to find its way back to do. Was that too bad? So that's all, and I think we're a small enough group. If anyone has any questions, we can have questions here, or we can just all kind of congregate and chat.
Yeah. What are you going to do with this training?
What am I going to do with it? Oh, that's a great question. So this is actually in their system, this is the first of many. And so for one, I guess I have taken it into the groups that I already work with. So we did a game this morning, like the clapping game, that came from this training. So working with the kids, and even when I'd give individual music lessons. And then the goal of the organization is to really have people take it into their communities. So I would hope I think articulating it also is very important to me, but I would hope to also find other groups that I can work with and just create spaces of music with them. Yeah.
But does Musicians Without Borders, like Doctors Without Borders, sends doctors to other parts of the world? Does Musicians Without Borders do that also? Send
Yes.
musicians out to other groups to work with them?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. So they have the places that I listed in the beginning. They have permanent establishments there that stay, and they have program directors. The program directors, it was really cool. All the program directors from all of these places came, and they are the ones who train everyone who comes to the training. And then they go back to Palestine and Ireland and El Salvador. So, and in talking with them, they definitely pull from the trainees that come. They say, if they need help, please come. And they're also in the process of partnering with universities to research the power of music. So it's something that seems like once you're involved, you can be loosely involved or heavily involved. But there are also trainings, as I said, the one I went to was the first level. And as you move up, I think there are 3 different levels. And kind of the last one is, okay, so what program can you start where?
Wow.
So that's the trajectory of their mission. Yes.
Sarah, do you think there's any potential that we might be, meaning not just Immanuel, but our community and our country might use some of these tools to help us with the polarization you see everywhere?
Oh my gosh, say that.
Is there a place we could start?
Yeah. Yes.
And with adults, I think. Certainly
Yes.
Children are a hope.
Yeah. I think you're so completely right. And I think about that a lot. Like, where could this happen and where could this help? And someone said, we were playing a musical game, and afterwards everyone was just so peaceful, and they said, I think Congress should do this every time they convene. And somebody else said, I was just thinking the same thing, that every staff meeting should start this way. And I think that it's so it's so important, and I'm just starting to say, for a long time I felt like, because when you start and you're all sitting around in a circle with drums, it doesn't feel normal, it doesn't feel comfortable, and so it's almost like I'm just starting to be able to say, this is like taking your vitamins, so we're gonna do this. Even when people complain, and the kids especially, because they're like, oh no, like we have to do a group activity. I don't really like group activities, and I don't want to participate. Once they get going, they're having a great time, but in order to start that, and some adults are so amazing and willing to. Some adults are like, this is ridiculous. I am not going to sit in a circle and sing with you. No. And so it's just navigating that, but I think that these are the skills and tools, and yeah, so I think you're right. Yes?
Just an example of what you're talking about. Munch taught at a hospital in Swaziland. And every morning they started work by singing for 20 minutes together. And of course, I'm sure many of you have heard the way Africans can sing.
It's amazing.
The Swazis are very close to Zulu, so if you've heard the famous Zulu singers, that's the kind of way they sang. It's amazing harmonies.
Yeah.
Anyway, she said that it just completely set the tone for that whole hospital. And she remembered one day when she was, she heard singing down the corridor in the middle of the day. And she asked, what's happening here? And they said, they're singing her home. There was a woman
She was
who
dying. Wow.
Yeah, so you're right. I can only think about the power that music had during the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
And during the peace movement and anti-war movement.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful.
It's incredibly powerful. Yeah, there was an experience that I had in Israel. We went into this cave, and I was afraid. It was a small space. And I said, can you guys sing? Like, can you sing? I'm really scared. And it like completely changed everything. So I just think sharing these stories with each other and having this conversation is so important to acknowledge. I also think like any powerful tool, it hasn't always been used for good, and it's also important to acknowledge that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll be here around, and I'm so grateful to you all for coming, and this kind of conversation is one that goes back to communities. So I'm always so welcoming. I want to hear all of your ideas and thoughts and requests, and thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity. Thank you.